Welcome to QTV's weekly roundup of the proceedings at the TRRC. My name is Mamadou Mbodj, and I have here with me on the panel our two correspondents. On my right sits Mr. Babakar Sise, and on my left, Mr. Ansumane S.O. Nyasi. They've been covering the proceedings at the TRRC. The Commission has now completed its third week. But before we get into that, we will have a short recap of what we've had so far, week 1 and week 2. Week 1, on the very first day, on the 7th, we had Chongan, Ibrahim Chongan, who was by then the Assistant or the Deputy Inspector General of Police. His testimony took 2 days, and according to him, he felt that the government, Jawara's government, made a monumental mistake in merging the gendarmerie with the police, thereby undermining its effectiveness as a counterweight to the army. So come July 22nd, 1994, the army heavily outgunned the gendarmerie. Therefore, they couldn't put up a resistance. And he also talked about the malign influence of the Nigerians. Remember, in Nigeria, they had Babangida as president and afterwards Abacha, and they were used to frequent coups in that country. So he felt that when they came over here, they influenced our soldiers to think along those lines. He also talked about the Liberian experience. They had a contingent that was sent to Liberia, not for peacekeeping, but for peace enforcement. All of these things contributed. And on the day of July 22nd itself, at Denton Bridge, he said he gave orders to Suare to shoot, to stop the soldiers from crossing the bridge. But apparently that didn't happen. He was the only one that fired the shot of resistance. Eventually, he was arrested and incarcerated at Mile 2 prisons, where he was also tortured, he said. Next up on the witness seat was Captain Suare, Captain Suare. He accepted that he modified the order because he said he wanted to avoid bloodshed. He said that he led the coup makers to Banjul, and he said at the Denton Beach, actually before they left, he was promised a ministerial position which he declined. But eventually, he accepted appointments as Commissioner North Bank Division then. So after 2 years, though, he was fired. Next up was Gomez, Sheriff Gomez. He was the adjutant at the time, but he said that when he reported to work on the 22nd of July, he was rushed by Edward Singate and others for the armory keys, which were in his suitcase. They got the keys and had access to the armory. He didn't blame the Nigerians as much, unlike Chongan. He thought that the army had no business with political decisions. He was arrested and incarcerated at Mile 2. While there, he said he saw electrical torch machine, which he thought might have been used on Sana Sabali and Sadibou Haidara, perhaps leading eventually to Sadibou's death. Yes. And in one of the most poignant silences of the proceedings was when he was asked about the temperament of Edward Singate. He kept quiet for a while, sobbed, tears streaming down his cheeks. That ended the first week. And then the second week. The second week, the first person up on the witness seat was Alaji Kante. He emphasized much on the Nigerian ineptitude in training, because when they had that training in Kudang, he felt that the standards were low. At least he had been to Sandhurst, and there were others who had been to the USA. Apparently, according to them, the training was quite substandard. He also dilated much on the apparent rift within the PPP and the corruption, these things forming the backdrop to their disgruntlement. Yes. So he was at the surreptitious meeting they had at Kudang, and after the coup, he was made the first government spokesperson. He was eventually detained for 3 months, released, and appointed commissioner. Then up we had Abubakar Jeng. He was the first secretary to the junta. Therefore, he was privy to most of their meetings. And his description of the coup leaders portrays an inchoate gang of 4 with hardly any clue as to what to do. He said that he suggested to them that they should make a public announcement, to allay the fears of the people, and that he thought that the coup was a fluke and could have been resisted either at Denton Bridge or by an external force. So after Jeng, we had Mohammed Cham, who said that on his way on the 22nd to Banjul, He was stopped at the Denton bridge and was asked to go back and report to the officers at the barracks. But instead, he went to Kotu to meet the Nigerian soldiers there, from where they called Farafenye to bring reinforcements through Bara to help resistance in Banjul. And then, from there, when he realized around 2:30 that President Jawara had vacated the seats of government, then it was the Nigerians as well relinquished their responsibilities. There was a vacuum, so they had to fill it in. He went to the State House, and at the gate, Edward Singate came and met him and said to him that they were looking for him. So once he got in there, they decided to set up a transitional government, and he said, coined the term AFPRC, Armed Forces Provisional Ruling Council. And from there, he went to see the Senegalese ambassador because there were reports of movements of Senegalese troops on the border. So they went to Senegal, they went to the Senegalese embassy, he went to the Senegalese embassy to convey the junta's goodwill to them. And then afterwards he got Abdou Diouf's number and they spoke to him, and then Abdou Diouf said that Senegal was neutral in all of this. He said the junta agreed to form a cabinet of both military and civilians. And among the civilians mentioned were Satang Jaw, Amina Fall Sonko, Swaibu Konate, Khalifa Sallah, Sam Sarr, Ousseynou Dabo, and Fafa Mbaye. He said he visited all of them to inform them of this. He said he was also involved in the drafting of the speech to the nation, and he drove Yaya Jammeh to Radio Gambia, where he read the speech. Afterwards, he was appointed Minister of Tourism and Culture. On the 27th of July, he was also arrested and taken to Mile 2. He noted the crudity of the conditions of their detention, the poor ventilation, lack of bed sheets and pillows, lots of mosquitoes and rats and barely edible food. And in fact, this has been a regular theme. Most of them, almost all of them, have said this. He said the junta on the 6th of September 1994 came to the security wing at Mile 2, but Yaya Jammeh wasn't one of them and tortured him, Chongan, and RSM Jeng. Next up was the anonymous witness. He said on the 22nd, soldiers left the barracks at Yundum and headed for Banjul. Then at Denton Bridge, they met Captain Soare, who joined them without resistance. He said they made their way to the State House, but there was no clear leader at this time. But they said also the junta were quite uncomfortable with the soldiers and constantly feared a counter-coup. So on the 11th of November 1994, Edward Singate, Sana Sabali, Sadibou Haidara, and Yankubu Toure led a group of soldiers from State Guard to attack Yundum and Fajara barracks. He said that about 20 people possibly died. Among the executed, he named Abdoulaye Fall, Aliou Cissé, Basiru Baro, Basiru Kamara, Ibrahim Mane. And he said some of these bodies were buried in Nyambai Forest and at the barracks. So, gentlemen, now we come to the third week. And the third week, the first witness up was Baboucar Jatta. He was a prison medic at the time. And Ansumana, so you covered the story. Tell us what were some of the key revelations we got from Baboucar Jatta.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mboj. Baboucar in 1994 was the prison medic, and he was responsible for the treatment of 1994 coup detainees, the November 11 detainees, as well as the Katong attack detainees. And he also, in his testimony, did say that he was responsible for treating Sana Sabali and Sadibou Haidara, who eventually died in prison. So one of the most key highlights of his testimony was when he confirmed statements that were previously made by Chongan and other witnesses who first came in the first week, that they were tortured. He confirmed this. He said he did not witness where they were tortured, but he can say that they had injuries all over their bodies, some sustained very serious injuries, and he believes this was as a result of the torture that was meted out to these detainees at the time. And he also gave us an idea of what prison used to be like before the 1994 military takeover, that at the time they had only detainees or do I say inmates in the remand wing as well as convict wings of the prisons. But then it was after the military took over that this new concept, this whole idea of having detainees came up as well.
Yes, that was it. Structurally, this was exactly it. He said that at first, any prisoner, anybody who was taken to Mile 2 prisons, you would have to go with a committed warrant, he called it. So they had convicts and those on remand. Mm-hmm. But suddenly, 1994 and after, there was a new class of prisoners. They called detainees, right? Babukar, it was from your namesake, Mr. Jatta, we realized that things were becoming politicized.
Yes, I think Mr. Jatta, first, before 1994, there were two categories, as Eso said. Yes. Prisoners on remand and convicted prisoners who were already sentenced. And then later on, a new name emerged, detainees, because they are not convicted and they are not on remand. They call them detainees. And actually, Jatta said the first people they brought in were security personnel. And he named them like Chongan, Mamar Cham, RSM Jeng, and JSP Mendy, Alaji Kante, Pasala Jany, I think he was the then Inspector General of Police, and Keba Sise, NSS Director.
Yes, the National Security Service.
Yes, Director. And Samsidin Sar also was named. So he said they came, when they were bringing them there, they have multiple wounds on them. And then he was the one treating them. And he specifically mentioned 3 people, that is Samsidin Sar, Keba Sise, and who is the third one again? Pastor Lajaj. Yes. He said they had psychological trauma. And I think this was actually confirmed at some point where someone said Samsidin Sar refuses to eat when he was in the cells. So this man also confirmed the same thing, that Samsidin was not eating. So obviously it's all due to psychological trauma and the punishment or the torture they alleged to have gone through. And Jatta continued to say, he said these people, when they bring them in, they will say it's executive order. So, and they are not to question who is actually giving those orders. See, so he said the detainees have multiple wounds, they have no medical care, they are not allowed to go to hospital. So he was actually treating them, and he has very little, medical equipment with him at the time, because this GB paint, they call it.
Yes, I think GV paint.
GV paint.
Yes.
I mean, if that's because that's the only thing he mentioned, that he had to cure them. That means these people cannot even go to hospital, or a doctor cannot come to see them. So obviously, and then he went to mention about Aliuba. I think you'll get it.
We'll get to that later. But first, let's take an excerpt. Let's watch this excerpt where he explains the restructuring of the prison services.
Can you please tell us what the normal procedure was for bringing in prisoners into Mile 2?
The normal procedure is either you are convict or remand. When you are brought to prisons, you first go to our, we call it gate lodge, where they will book you, all your committed warrants and so, and then next step you go to the reception, where if you are convicted, your sentence will be computed in your presence. If you are remand, they take your, as we did, we don't, the finger rings and watches and the like will be kept as your property until you are discharged or released.
Was this normal procedure followed after the 1994 coup?
After the 1994 coup. It continues, but not on certain inmates like detainees.
What procedure was not followed?
The normal procedure on certain detainees were not followed, because they will come, as they bring them, nobody is there to stop them. After keeping them for a while, the reception officer will go and meet them where to do some our processing. But normally the processing should start at the gate lodge, as I said, to reception and then go.
Welcome back to QTV's weekly roundup of the TRRC proceedings. Now, gentlemen, so And there were other things as well he mentioned. For instance, I think we begin to see the politicization of the institutions. He said afterwards having to wear T-shirts, party colors, and then having to go to Kanilai to farm as the president used to do. Tell us more about that. I think we're beginning to see the initial politicization of everything. Either you're with them or you are against them.
Yeah, like I said earlier, his testimony gave us an insight as to what prison used to be like prior to the military takeover and after the military takeover. First, he also, mentioned or talked about the manner in which some of these detainees were brought in. Usually when you bring in detainees or prisoners, I should say, they are processed. You go through the normal procedure, and then you're taken to your various cells. But that was not happening with the military detainees or political detainees. That too he questioned and talked about in detail. And then the politicization of the institution itself, security personnel, or do I say security personnel at Mile 2, the prison service officers were, seen wearing political T-shirts, and this you had to do, or you had to join the group of people that were taken to Kanila at the time to go and farm at the president's various farms there. These are things that you had to do, or else, you'd be seen as an enemy or someone who's not in support of the regime. So it was politicized to an extent where some officers, I think he mentioned 2 or 3 officers who decided they were leaving, the job, that they had to quit their jobs because they were not comfortable anymore. So these are, problems that they were faced with at the time. And he also said something which we all find quite interesting, that they were scared working at Mile 2 as prison officers, because you see, one minute you see a military officer is brought in as a detainee, and then the next minute the individuals that brought them in are also brought in, and detained. So it was not safe for them anymore, and they really were working under very, very, serious conditions.
Yes. Not only not safe for them, but I think there was an instance where a prison officer was actually detained there as well. I think he mentioned that.
Yes.
Like when Sana Sabali came there, according to him, to inspect the prisons at night or at some point, and then the officer was in there, and then he gave orders for his arrest, and I think the officer was humiliated and detained for a few weeks. So obviously anybody working under that condition would actually fear for their lives.
Absolutely.
When different people of different categories have been brought in. But with regards to the farming, you said also, yes, he mentioned that people were going to Jamme's farm. Okay, but according to, if you look at what some of the witnesses say, according to their history, it's like this farming thing didn't start with Jammeh. You remember someone said the senior army commanders were actually taking junior ones to their farms. So I think this farming thing started well before Jammeh became president. Do you remember that, where they said?
And quite interestingly, about especially the prison officer whom Sabali had locked up, remarkable reversal of fate. Afterwards, when Sabali was brought in, apparently he opened the door, looked at him, shook his head, and just left. Wasn't that a piece of poetic justice there? Very interesting.
Incredible.
Incredible.
If you look at the political environment at the time, I think it's only natural that they were scared, because if you have a senior colleague, being detained for no reason, as a junior officer, obviously, naturally you'll be moved, because you can never tell if you'll be the next victim. And in fact, when he was talking about the conditions of the prison at the time, to link with what you said earlier, regarding some of the practices or things that were going on prior to the military takeover, you realize those wood planks that used to be in those cells were there even during the days of Jawara. And these are things that the military junta adopted and made it even worse. And these things continued into the Second Republic as well.
Yes, absolutely. But in all fairness, he said that he had never seen any torture.
Yes.
Yes, he had never seen any torture. Yeah. But then he was getting the information because he was on permanent day shift. So, but he was getting the information from his colleagues and the inmates.
Yes.
Some of the inmates, whenever he got there in the morning, they would actually, they would say to him, there was movement. I think that was the term.
I think he wasn't the military personnel, so he may not be privy to all that. But obviously, if you are a doctor or a medic working somewhere and you see people coming with multiple wounds, you know those wounds are actually inflicted by someone or something happened. So, but he's honest enough to say Probably. He didn't see anybody being tortured.
But then he said that the wounds, the bruises, and some of them the deep lacerations were consistent with what might sustain under torture.
I think even if he were coming in the, I mean, if he were in the night shift, he wouldn't have known these things because he would not have had the chance to see these things physically. Because remember, in his testimony, he also said that at some point, even prison officers were denied access to the security wings of the Mile 2 prisons. You had members of the Gambia Armed Forces who were posted there.
Yes.
I mean, soldiers were posted there, and they were responsible for everything, except for him and the director. I mean, who, of course, for him, he had to go there and attend to these detainees at the time. And that was like just a few hours during the daytime. So it would have been difficult for him to see these things.
Yes. So now he is the Commissioner of Prisons in Janjanbureh. Yeah. So, you know, towards the end, they let them speak their mind about what to do next, because that's what we're trying to do here, to reform the institutions, how we can make things better. What exactly did he say there regarding that one? Well,
he said prisons should be a rehabilitation center and not the kind of system we have now, where you're sent to prison and then you're condemned. I mean, you send people to prison because they've committed a crime, or they've done something that is not inconsistent with the law, and you want them to at least have a change of attitude. But it's not unfortunate, you know, that here, when you're sent to prison, you're condemned. He wanted that to change. One thing he said, which kind of struck me, was that government policy on drugs and the courts are contributing to the overcrowding of our prisons, because you would be caught with, you know, one pack of marijuana, and you're sentenced to maybe, 10 years in prison, you know, and you are there. Once you're out of prison, you commit the same crime and you're brought back again. He believes, you know, there could be better mechanisms or better ways of controlling these things. And in terms of prison reforms, he wants, Mile 2 to be shut down, to be closed completely. And then we have a new prisons, you know, that will be of standard. Because, having the commissioner of the second biggest prison in the country say, our prisons are not meant for human beings. That is not a small statement. I think it's something that, you know, we need to look at. And it goes to show how wrong the entire system is. You know, and I think he's giving us an insight, you know, as to the conditions of our prisons and what needs to be done.
Needs to be done. Yes, but before we leave this, there was something he mentioned about somebody called Aluba, and the information he got from Aluba. Let's just view this excerpt and see.
Did you see or treat Captain Barrow at any other time in Mile 2?
No.
Were you informed that at some point Captain Barrow was in Mile 2?
This too was a story narrated by one Aliuba. You know, remember those carton attackers? He was terribly sick. Then Aliu was admitted at infirmary. We keep him at infirmary because he don't have access to hospital at that time. So Aliu, if you see what he pulled out, if he vomit, it's dark like this beret. So as he admitted there, more than even some of our officers will tell me today he's going to die. But with the help of God and help of hospital, Mr. Manga and others, doctors start coming to attend to him, different doctors. You have medical doctors, like one Dr. Jah, and then you have Dr. Sala. This is an audiologist doctor, because he here too has a problem. And even surgeons, they come and see him. Ali was with us more than 4 to 5 months. When he recovered, he started narrating his stories to us. That the reason why he was among the carton attackers, because he said he was a soldier who was one time escaped from an execution ground here. I said, what are you saying? He said at Fajara Barrack, something like that. He said to me, you see me, I'm a lucky man. I would have been dead by now. He said, we were brought here by Barrow at Remind Week. Well, he was explaining his story. He said, I told him, but Ali, I tell you, stop this thing. He said, no, I have to tell you my story because I would have died. He said, I even mentioned this at the court. at the court when they were trying him. So he said to me, well, we were brought here, later we are taken away, together with Barrow. Then Barrow was, even some of his tooth, he lost his tooth. He said because of the gun butt that they hit him.
Welcome back to the weekly roundup of the proceedings at the TRRC. So yes, just before we left.
About Aliuba, you said.
Yes.
Aliuba is very interesting because I think Aliuba was one of those who was alleged to have been part of the Katong attack, the people who attacked Katong, and he was actually apprehended and then imprisoned. And he said Aliuba confided to him that he was captured alongside with, what is his name again?
Lieutenant
Basiru Barrow. And Barrow was severely tortured. In fact, when he was being brought to the prisons, there was no teeth in his mouth, or he lost most of his teeth because of alleged torture, as Aliuba said. And it's interesting to know that Aliuba also told him that Basiru Barrow was actually taken from Mile 2 and was taken away and executed somewhere, you know. So that was the thing. But again, just to remind you, this Aliuba has, he was named among the, you remember the 9 people who were executed in August 2012?
All right.
I mean, his name was mentioned among them, that he was executed.
He was executed.
Yes, he was executed among those Mile 2, 9 people. That was the information I have about Aliuba.
I think in his statement, in his testimony, he also corroborated the claims that were earlier made by the unidentified witness, that all the junta members except Jame were present at the execution of the November 11, detainees. Yes. And it was from him in his testimony when we got this information that Barrow was brought to Mile 2 first and then taken away, something that even prison officers are not aware of. So I think it tells us the kind of system we had at the time.
Yes, thank you very much. We'll move on to the next witness. So after Babukar, we had another witness. We had here. Please take us through Tijan Toure, ex-presidential bodyguard.
Oh yeah,
to President Jawara.
Yeah, Tijan Toure was a bodyguard to President Jawara at the time at State House, and now a former bodyguard anyway. And he also explained about what happened on the day, when the coup happened, that he was at State House, and when soldiers came in, obviously, I think he said Lantombon Tamba, actually, they wanted to resist at State House. He said, but it was impossible because he said Turo Jaune was the senior commander, and very, very influential, and he was liked by a lot of guards at that State House, that he wasn't there. But he believed if Turo was there, probably they would have resisted the coup.
Yes.
And he said because Turo was not there, and when these people went, because Turo was taken away, he said their morale at State House was actually low because of his absence. And then he mentioned when these people took over the place as well, he said he was actually ready to mobilize some people to come and counter these people. But I think he said Lantombong, wouldn't agree with the plans. And he even said at one point that he believed, although he was not 100%, but he believed that Lantombong may have revealed that information to the junta. That's why he fell out with them. But he also went to explain that when Jawara went inside that, when Jawara went inside the American ship actually, that was anchored at the sea. I mean, actually, I think he said Jawara thought that he's going to come back. It's not a matter of going away. He said, but Jawara was staying there for some time, and then the ship started moving. And then Jawara asked the captain, he said, what's going on? Where are we going? And he said, the captain said, I've got orders that I should leave Gambian waters, and the nearest port here is Dakar. So we are going to Dakar. So interestingly, he said on their way, then they were listening to radio, and there was this information that Sir Dawda Jawara has been given political asylum in Senegal. And Jawara said, what's going on? I've never sought for asylum in Senegal. Why am I given asylum?
Yes.
So that's how.
Exactly. Everything seemed quite murky. In fact, the anomalies, maybe you'll come in, the anomalies began on the 21st of July, wasn't it? When Jawara returned from the AU summit at the airport.
Yes.
Let's just take a look at this clip first, and then we discuss it.
So everything was all right. Everybody was happy. We were very proud and very tidy, because for one to be tidy, you have to look at how tidy your commander was. And tidiness was something that was paramount. Everybody have to be clean and neat and got this strong gendarmerie character and behavior that we had.
Can you recall the time of the year where you were taken to the State Guard unit?
89. Yes, this was the time, around 1988.
Can you take us through your activities of the day as a State Guard?
So, whilst I was in uniform, what we do is, sentries where there are some things that I can tell, which is a military way of protecting or guiding, a VIP or presidential guard, I call it. The number of hours we stay on guard, I can't disclose that. As a soldier, I'm not more a soldier, but once a soldier, always a soldier. There are certain things that the way we walk and the way we do it, or the number of hours we spend there, I can't tell you that, I'm sorry, but I will say that whilst on sentry, we will do our duties for the number of hours we are supposed to do, and then we'll be replaced by our colleagues, who then will go and rest in the guard room. When Trrc is in, our activities to go out, even the guard commander will dares not to allow the sentries just to start going out in town, doing whatever you like in town. No, until in the evening when he goes home is when the cat is away, the mice will play. We start this when all permissions are granted, because Jaune is not around. So yeah, this is it. We are very happy. We are very proud, and yeah, this is our activity: playing draft, reading your books, and yeah, and goes for road running with Trrc, which was a compulsory thing that you have to do. You'll be in trouble if you miss that. Yeah, this was our activities. If you are on off, you are on off. Then you do what you want to do, as long as it's all good and legal. You're okay. But yes, just like a normal soldier.
So aside from the State Guard duties, did you have any other corresponding duties?
No, within the State House, no. As a State Guard, all your duties were as a State Guard. Until as a bodyguard, plainclothes officer, then it's different. Then when I was elected to be a plainclothes officer, because this guard thing I'm talking about is only to do as a physical guard, that people will see you in your uniform. But as a plainclothes officer, we had our office within the building of the president, and our activities there were to look after the programs of the president that was given to us by the commander, who will pass it to the plainclothes officer in charge of the plainclothes, like the senior man, yeah, and then who will tell us the activities of the family, like if the pa is going out, if Lady Chillen is going out, or if Lady Jamie is going out, or the kids are going out, it's all there. So at one point, based on my activities and the good job I was doing and the trust they had for me.
Welcome back to the program. Just before the break, we were talking about on the 21st, what happened in the airport. Take us through it.
I found his testimony very interesting. I mean, here is someone who was very close to the first family. I mean, at some point he was responsible for their personal safety. He went with former President Jawara to Tunisia, on his trip to Tunisia. They went to the UK and then Tunisia and then back to the UK, spent a week there, and then came back to the Gambia. And he said on the 21st, when they arrived at the airport, he was the first one to come out of the airplane. He stood there, looking around to see if everything was okay. But he said one thing he noticed was that personnel of the military police were not with their arms, and usually these are the people that would be armed, especially when they have the guard of honor.
Yes, and Yaya was part of the military police.
As head of that unit, he was not armed as well. But he said, he thought probably, it's just normal, but it was unusual anyway. And as soon as they touched down, he said Lang Tombong told him that you go and join the minibus. And this too was very unusual because as, a close bodyguard to the president, he should have been part of the convoy, he should have been with them. And, but he couldn't complain at the time, so they left. And that was why the following day when this thing happened, it started, becoming clear to him that probably maybe, just maybe, he must have had prior knowledge of what was about to happen. Because these events that happened at the airport, like I said, were quite unusual. And this, he couldn't understand. And also, like Babukar said, on the day of the coup itself, that morning, the conversation he had with Jammeh, Lang and Jammeh, too, he said, struck him, to some extent, because he couldn't understand, how, Lang also gave in so easily, after that conversation with Jammeh and his colleagues at the gate. So as soon as they were stepping in, he left because he didn't want to be part of it. And he said the following day as well, when he went back to pack some of his things at the State House, Lang approached him and Lang said to him that we have to join these people because we don't have a choice. And I am being assigned to take over Fajara Barracks. What do you think? So he told him clearly that I am not going to be part of this. It is wrong. And he believes maybe because of some of the utterances he made at the time, that was why Lang must have relayed this information to Jammeh, and Jammeh didn't take it lightly. He was really mad. And he said at some point when he was in Dakar, he received information from one of his colleagues at the time that the junta, were actually looking for you.
Yes, but he didn't join the presidential vessel, if one can call it that. He didn't go with the vessel, did he?
No, he stayed behind, and he said afterwards he took a boat. He took a boat because when he suspected that his life may be in danger, he took a boat to Senegal, and that's when he actually joined Jawara, in Senegal.
In Senegal.
Yes.
So this is in Senegal as well. This is the first time we're getting information about how things were like in Senegal for Jawara on that 22nd of July. Yes. So tell us more about what the experiences.
Yes, in Senegal he mentioned two people. Very important because the first person he mentioned was, he said Bibi Dabo, who was the then vice president. Because in his way he said...
wasn't he Minister of Finance? I think at that time it was Seou Sabali.
Oh, Sabali was the vice president,
and Minister of Defense.
Bibi was Minister of Finance.
Yes.
Finance. Okay. Oh, yes, Finance, because after the junta brought him back and made him Minister of Finance.
Yes.
He said Bibi Dabo actually betrayed Jawara, according to, Toure. In what sense? He said because Bibi had all access to Abdou Diouf at the time, but Bibi wasn't there to negotiate between them. And also when they went to Dakar, actually Bibi, they only saw him once. Yeah. They never see him again. He said the vice president, Sekou Sabali, the then vice president, was always with them, but not Bibi Dabo. He said Bibi wasn't there. And then he went on to talk about Abdou Diouf as well. That Abdou Diouf also, for some reason, we know when this happened, according to some witnesses, Abdou Diouf said he will be neutral. So that neutrality, I think, continued or whatever, because Abdou Diouf avoided meeting Jawara for some reason. I don't know, because according to Tijan, Abdou Diouf, Jawara has tried many times, many attempts to talk to Abdou Diouf, but it wasn't possible. And he said Jawara was very isolated, in his words. And he said also he was actually denied some basic necessities, because if you had telephone to call international calls, Jawara didn't even have access to telephones to make a telephone to make international call. So the plight of Jawara at that stage was really, really disturbing, to be honest, Mr. Bush.
Yes, that is really quite curious here. I find it quite curious, perhaps because of the dissolution of the Confederation. Maybe that soured the relationship between Gambia and Senegal. It was quite interesting that
I think,
they didn't get any support from Senegal.
In my opinion, I think
according to these testimonies, anyway.
Yes, the dissolution of the Senegambia Confederation, might have played a part in this. We understand at the time, Jawara and Diouf didn't have, that kind of smooth relationship, following the dissolution of the Confederation. So I believe that might have played a role, in Diouf abstaining completely from, the events that were happening in Gambia at the time, because the message was clear. Even, you remember when Cham in his testimony said, when they went to the ambassador, he told them outright from the very first day that Senegal will not be involved in this. We're not taking part in anything like this, and it's an internal affair, and that's it, And I think, his testimony as well has given us, an idea as to how life was like for them, in Dakar.
Absolutely. I mean, the Senegalese reaction to our difficulties. But also remember, yes, earlier on you mentioned Bibi Dabo. One of the most fascinating things for me was when Jawara, apparently on the 22nd, when his aide-de-camp, his ADC, woke him up and said, we are going to the American vessel.
Vessel.
Yeah, the vessel. There was something going on at Denton Bridge. They thought it was a mutiny. Well, he said when he came down, he saw Sehu Sabali. Whereas on the previous day, as vice president, he should have been at the airport to welcome him, but Sehu Sabali wasn't there. Yes. So then he asked, what American vessel? As the commander, commander-in-chief of the army, he didn't know that there was an American vessel. And then, when they left, immediately, Bibi Dabo comes back. It's quite curious. Do you sense that perhaps there would be a civilian collusion with the military? What do you think? It's still all very murky.
It's difficult to judge here. Perhaps everybody should think properly about this. But then it's interesting. I mean, for example, Bibi Dabo. I mean, he came back. He wasn't arrested. He was made. I think he took his position again as Minister of Finance. But according to reports, it's only 70 days, 2 months, 10 days he spent in that position. And I think at that time it was a kind of trying to cajole him so that he can come and reveal this. Obviously, if a new government takes over, you want to know where all the monies are and everything. So I think that was a ploy that he didn't realize at the time, because for 2 months, 10 days in a position, I mean, I think that's weird.
Yes, and even Jawara made the point. Remember, when he returned, apparently perhaps they used him to reassure the international development partners, and he said that we had enough in our reserves, trying to allay fears of people. We had enough money, enough in our reserves. Then Jawara said, if we had been so rampant in our corruption and all of these things, how did we manage to have such reserves?
Well, that is what I also find very, very interesting. You remember when the junta took over, of course, the catchwords were accountability, transparency, and probity. And then the Jawara government were accused of nepotism, were accused of corruption, and all of these things. But if you read Jawara's book, where he talked about Bibi's statement after the coup, when he came back, to take over as finance minister, when he said, we have enough in our reserves, he said, that is where the question came. If that is so, how corrupt were we? And not only that, I think Chongan, in his statement, also made mention of some of the institutional failures. You talked about the probably civilian collusion in this. I think if you look at these things, closely, there's a high tendency, there's a high possibility that maybe, just maybe, there must have been, some civilian collusion in this.
Yes, well, there are more witnesses to come. We do not know. Here we are simply trying to solve, if you like, a jigsaw puzzle. With each new evidence, perhaps we may have to turn pieces around a bit. It will be quite fascinating to see what happens afterwards. So, that where is he now? He's living today. He's living in the UK now.
In the UK, yes.
Isn't it?
Yep.
Yes. So, from today, we had Kambi. So who's going to cover Kambi? Yasi?
Well,
tell us about Kambi.
Kambi used to be one of the most highly trained soldiers that Gambia had at the time, and he was part of the first batch you know, of trained soldiers, the first batch of the Gambia National Army soldiers. And, you know, he studied, you know, at various military schools in the US, you know, in the UK, and other parts of the world, and was part of the first batch of soldiers that were sent to Liberia on that peace enforcement mission as well, where he sustained a serious injury on his foot. And Kambi, interestingly, was head of logistics at the defense headquarters at the time. And after the coup, he continued. He served the junta for, I think, a week or more before he was arrested and detained at Mile 2 as well. And in his statement, he also confirmed or did, you know, mention the issue of torture. I mean, Chongan, RSM Jeng, and Cham's torture as well, which he said he saw. He said, this is something I saw with my own eyes because I stood on my bed that night when they were dragging them out, and it's something I can confirm as well. So I think Kambi was deeply involved, you know, with what was going on at the time, you know, a few days after the coup. Remember, he was in charge of logistics, providing new uniforms and boots to the junta and their orderlies. You know, he was also responsible for the government vehicles at the time, you know, making sure that they were all parked, you know, at their various parking points, and also went around to see if the soldiers that were, you know, stationed at the various checkpoints were also there to see if things were going on, you know, as expected. So he was involved, you know, deeply involved at the time.
He contributed a lot, really, to entrenching
before his arrest.
No, not only that, because I think he also mentioned, you know, he said at the time, Jammeh listened to him. Jammeh listened to him at the time. He mentioned that that's important, and that's why he said when some of the ministers were detained at the NSS headquarters, he said he was able to convince Jammeh, and then he worked with Jammeh on foot to the NSS headquarters to release some of the prisoners. We include Kamabaji and OJ Jallo, and to name a few.
Yes.
So I think that was very important there. And he said because of that, his closeness to Jammeh, and then other people started, realizing, and they were getting envious of him. And he said that might have led to all what happened, because he said after somebody actually gave him a tip off that, you know, you need to watch your back. That was after the release of these people, because according to him, the other junta members were not pleased with him convincing Jammeh to release these people.
Yes. So what eventually happened to him? How did they fall out?
Well, like Babukar said, you know, he allegedly claimed, convinced Jammeh to release these political detainees, you know, ex-cabinet ministers who were at the time detained. And this happened at a time when, remember, he said Jammeh was alone at the State House, and, you know, they used to be very close. They were together all the time. So he told him that, keeping these people here is of no use. You know, we don't need that. If you need any of them, what the best you can do is, get hold of their traveling documents, so they don't have to leave the country. And if you need them, you can always get them to clarify, you know, whatever you want them to clarify. So when Jammeh released these people, this was in the absence of other junta members and the council members, and they were not happy with it, especially Singate, who he said, you know, at some point even stopped greeting him, and they were not in talking terms. And remember, he was their senior at the time. So this, he was not comfortable with, and he received information, you know, a tip-off from one of the junior officers who was at the time oddly to Singate, who said to him that Singate is not happy with you, and I think you should watch your back. But he didn't listen, and, you know, eventually he was arrested and taken to Mile 2.
Yes. Was he tortured? Do we know anything whether, did he say that he was tortured?
Kambi, I don't think he meant, no, actually he talked about the deplorable condition of the prisons, like the food, the quality of food that he would not even give to his horse, for example. He did mention that, and he said also, I think he said when he was in prison, he was actually not feeling well, because if you can remember his leg, and he was even receiving physiotherapy with the, some negotiation, some help from the wife, who actually contacted some people, and he was doing some kind of physiotherapy because the wife is a nurse, and his leg had a problem, and but notwithstanding all that, he was still put in prison. These people didn't consider that. So obviously, and he spoke about Jammeh's uncle, very important here, one Bojang, you know, who used to help him like smuggle things out. You know, he said he'd been writing a few things, and then Jammeh's uncle one Bojang he mentioned, he never mentioned the name, had been helping him to smuggle those letters out to his wife and also to the American embassy. I think that led to the help that the embassy gave to his family. I think the family, after all, were repatriated to America at some point.
I think all the family
as
went.
Things unfold, yes.
So
that was also important. I mean.
Yes, and it seems in his testimony he also said that at some point he felt that he just didn't care anymore. Because if you can remember Babakar Jatta's testimony, he said that there were two people who were quite strong. He said Pasala Jan, and he also named Kambi.
Yes, I think after the mock execution, it was like, okay, we could also be executed any day. So all they saw was, we're going to die. Whatever happens, we're going to die. So, I mean, why worry myself? For him, this was what he was thinking at the time. And also, you remember after the mock execution, Tongan, RSM Jeng, and Cham were hidden, from their colleagues. They didn't have access to them. They didn't know where they were. So to them, the belief at the time was that these people are gone. I mean, they were assassinated. So they felt, as a senior officer at the time, he felt that, I mean, I could be next. So why worry myself? He didn't care anymore. And I think the mock execution played a role here in him saying, I didn't care anymore.
Yes, and also he mentioned, he said those who arrested him were Sana Sabali and Sadibu Haidara, I mean, with other soldiers. So obviously, did confirm his testimony that these people were not greeting him when they come in the morning because, he actually convinced Jammeh to release those ministers.
So how long did he spend in prison?
I think he served longer in prison than any of the military detainees who were there. I mean, he spent almost 3 years in prison, and and then when he was released, he said he was taken to State House where he met Jammeh, and then Jammeh, I mean, allegedly said to him that I wanted to release you, but if I did, I mean, there would have been a big problem because my other council members, every time I bring up this issue of releasing you, they would say no. I mean, especially Sabali and Singate.
Okay. This all takes us back to, again, what he mentioned about other junta members being envious of him. I think he said he was released after the elections.
After the elections.
After the elections. And then that's when he was reappointed again by, the Barrow coalition government. And this is because, he said, when that issue of the standoff was going on where, I mean, Jammeh didn't step down and then there was that commotion in the country.
The impasse.
He said, the impasse, the political impasse they call it. He said he actually went to be a bodyguard to President Barrow in Brufut. And I think, I mean, they've seen the role he played. Then after all, they compensated him. He went back to the army again.
Thank you very much. You want to address things?
Just interestingly, when he was asked, I mean, the manner in which he was released, he said, I am still on bail. I was told I am being released on bail. And I am still on bail because no one ever said to me that your case has been dropped. In fact, he was never taken to court or charged or anything. And this too, is something I found quite interesting.
I hope the authorities are taking note to help him there. So next, we have our final.
Kambi, finally, remember what he said about the perpetrators. That's very important here.
Oh, yes.
Because he did mention that instead of he wants the perpetrators to be brought in front of the commission for them to actually talk first before the victims, for them to explain what they've inflicted on victims. I mean, he made that pledge.
Yes, but I was puzzled by that because if I say that we are going to bring the perpetrators, well, that implies that we know that they are perpetrators. But here, the investigation is there to find out who are the perpetrators. I felt that there was a slight flaw in his argument. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the TRRC process is an investigation, and those who are looking at part of their mandate is to, I mean, make strong recommendations, I mean, on institutional reform to ensure that these things don't happen again, So I think that's a question for me. I don't think I would buy that. I think, the process should be allowed to continue the way it is because since it's an investigation, but once you say let's bring the perpetrators first, I mean, it's like you're telling me that we know who.
That's it. You're already making the judgment.
Yeah, the judgment that we know who the perpetrators are, and this process is to actually find out who the perpetrators are, what they must have done at the time, and what do we do to ensure that these things don't happen again, to eschew a replica of those things.
Yeah, but finally, then he said the army needs proper regimentation. he said people should be promoted based on merit.
Yeah, he talked about
but
bogus.
He spoke
bogus
about.
ranks.
He said there are bogus ranks in the army. It was created during the last.
This is quite interesting because it is still perpetuated. The bogus ranks that were created, they still stand today. That's what he was saying. So they have to do. They need to go back and revisit everybody's ranks to make sure that you had it. Well, that's a moot point. Let's move on. Let's move on to our final witness, Bini Minte. Nyasi, take us through his testimony quickly, because
well, I think the most significant of events that happened on the day of the coup, that's 22nd July 1994, happened at Denton Bridge, because all these witnesses, talked about Denton Bridge and how significant, the significant role it played, in the success of the coup, because that is the gate, is the main gate, is where you can only get access to Banjul, on this side.
So if they had resisted,
yes,
this is it.
Bine,
they had resisted,
actually was in charge of a unit under the Tactical Support Group at the time, and when they were deployed, he was assistant to Captain Suare, who was commander of the team that was deployed to the bridge. He gave us an insight, as to what happened at the bridge.
Let's take a look at this clip.
Yes.
This final clip of Bine talking about what happened at Denton Bridge.
Can you tell us what happened after you arrived at the bridge and organized yourself in that defensive position? What happened after that?
After we arrived at the bridge, we were there for close to about 30 minutes or a bit longer when units of the Gambia National Army started arriving. So it was a recognition team that came first. And then we began to see trucks coming. So at this point, our commander, Suare, he indeed took up on himself to go and find out what was actually happening, who were actually the soldiers who were coming. And I believe when he went at that point, Jammeh, Edward Singate, and others were probably there. So it took some time. Actually, we did not even hear from Suare after he went to find out. So it took long before myself and Jaju decided that we should go find out. The late Lamin Jaju.
Carry on, please.
So it took some time before we decided that it was about time for us to go find out what was happening, because we didn't hear from our commander. So we went, myself and Jaju, and as we approached them, we saw Suare was behind them.
Behind who?
In my view, behind Yaya Jammeh, Edward Singate, and the troops. He was lying with them. In my view, as I rightly noted, I believe that he was seized. I believe that he was not at liberty.
What do you mean by he was seized? Could you explain that further, please?
Well, when I say he was seized, I would just say in military terms, he was captured. In simple terms, he was not at liberty because he could not talk to us. It was only Edward Singate who actually ordered us to put our arms down and put our hands up. We complied with his orders. And these were the words from Edward Singate's mouth. He said to me, and Jaju Minte, I know you guys. As you can see, we have broken the armories. We have outnumbered you. We are more armed than you. We want to get across that bridge. We want to get to Banjul. If you cannot join us, don't stop us, because we can blow this bridge with just a rocket-propelled grenade.
Welcome back to QTV's weekly roundup of the proceedings at the TRRC. Just before the break, Nyasi, we were talking about Bini.
Interesting.
Bini Minte and Denton Bridge. That was crucial. So you said he was under the command of Suare.
He was under Suare's command. And interestingly, I think his testimony kind of corroborated, claims that were made by the unidentified witness, that they found it so easy to cross the bridge because Suare easily gave in after a short conversation with Jammeh. And according to Bine, they were stationed at the other side of the bridge. And then Suare walked across the bridge to meet Jammeh and his colleagues. And after a short conversation, Suare lay on the ground in combat position. And he was there with his colleagues, after, 20, 30 minutes. Suare was not coming. They didn't hear from him. And he was their commander. He was in charge. So he said to one of his colleagues, one Jaju, he didn't say the first name. He said to him, let's go and see what's happening at the other end of the bridge. So they walked across the bridge, went to the other side of the bridge, to meet Jammeh and his colleagues. Then that was when Edward approached him and said, Minte, I know you, I know you and your colleague. You people are nice people, you are fine people. Please don't involve yourself in this. If you ask me, I think you should just go. You can see, we're well armed and you cannot, there's no way you can stop us. And then he said when he turned, surprisingly, he saw Suare on the ground. Suare was not saying anything. He tried to make certain movements, certain signs to see if Suare would respond, but Suare didn't. And that was when he knew that Suare, he said, maybe was, under arrest. But it kind of puzzled him that Suare, given his position at the time, as a senior officer, as commander of the tactical support group. Remember these were, lieutenants that he was dealing with, and he seniored them. He couldn't understand that. So he went back, briefed his men of what he saw, what was going on the other end of the bridge, and said to them, I think we should leave. So that was how he withdrew his unit, and they went to the police headquarters.
In Banjul. Yes, and he said something about the Nigerians as well. He was quite critical of the Nigerians. So far, we haven't had anybody make any claim that the Nigerians were directly involved somehow. But his testimony seemed to...
Well, Bine said he's convinced, he's very much, he has this strong belief that the Nigerian soldiers were involved in this. He said if they were not involved in this as commanders at the time, they could have easily issued orders to stop the mutiny. And also he said the Nigerian soldiers were in the habit of telling our Gambian soldiers all the time that if this was in Nigeria, we'll do it our way. And they kept on saying these things even in public. That too, he said he couldn't understand. Yes. But what actually struck him was at the airport.
It's not only Minte who said
at the airport as well, where he said after they were disarmed, when Jammeh and his colleagues were disarmed at the airport, they were allowed to go. They were allowed to go free. This, he said, was the turning point. He couldn't comprehend that. And he believed the Nigerian soldiers were complicit in this.
Thank you very much. All, of course, conjecture, speculation. We are merely getting the testimonies. We do not know actually what happened. Hopefully, as we get more testimonies, the pieces will fall into place. Thank you very much. We've come to the end of the program. Thank you very much, Babakar Sise. Thank you very much, Ansumana Nyase. And thank you, viewers and listeners on Q Radio 103.3. Thanks for joining us on our weekly roundup of the proceedings at the TRRC. Hope to see you next week.